You wake up before sunrise, and something is wrong. The ground is hard. The air hurts your lungs. The river that gave your group water yesterday has turned into stone. And for the first time in your life, the world is not just dangerous. It is cold. This is the moment your ancestors faced one of the most brutal questions in human history. How do you survive a season that seems designed to erase you? Because winter, for most of human history, was not cozy. It was not hot chocolate, blankets, windows, and complaining that the heater takes too long. Winter was a giant environmental test that arrived without mercy. It removed food from the ground. It pushed animals away. It made water harder to reach. It turned darkness longer. It made every mistake more expensive. A wet foot could become a serious problem. A dying fire could become a disaster. A failed hunt could mean children stopped moving as much. And nobody could simply wait out indoors because indoors barely existed. But here's the thing. Ancient humans did survive. Not all of them. Not easily. Not comfortably. But enough of them survived that you are here now, sitting in a world full of electric light, warm clothes, delivery food, and the strange luxury of being able to dislike winter aesthetically. Your ancestors did not have that luxury. To them, winter was not a mood. It was a predator that did not need teeth. And the first problem was the most obvious one. Your body is terrible at cold. That sounds unfair, because humans like to think of themselves as adaptable. We live in deserts, forests, mountains, islands, tundra, cities, and office buildings with air conditioning set by someone who clearly has no soul. But biologically, a naked human is not built like a winter animal. You have no thick fur. You have no insulating feathers. You cannot curl up under your own tail. Your fingers lose dexterity quickly. Your skin gives heat away fast. Your babies are even worse at staying warm than you are. A wolf carries its winter coat on its body. A reindeer grows insulation. A bear can store fat and sleep through the worst of it. A human being basically shows up with exposed skin, emotional complexity, and the ability to panic creatively. So the first great winter invention was not one tool. It was a system. Fire, shelter, clothing, food, movement, memory, and group cooperation all had to work together. If one part failed, the whole thing could fail. And fire was the center of that system. Fire did several things at once. It gave heat. It gave light. It kept some predators away. It made food safer and easier to digest. It dried wet materials. It turned a cave or shelter from a place where bodies were simply hiding into a place where humans could actually remain alive through the night. But fire had a problem people often forget. Fire is not just a discovery. Fire is a responsibility. You do not simply have fire. You feed it. You guard it. You protect it from rain and snow. You collect fuel before you need it. You learn which wood burns hot, which wood smokes too much, which damp branches are useless, and which dry materials can help a weak ember become flame again. In a warm season, a failed fire is annoying. In winter, it can become a crisis. Imagine being part of a small group somewhere in Ice Age Europe or Northern Asia. The sun is already low. The wind is rising. Someone has to gather wood. Someone has to keep children close. Someone has to repair a hide covering. Someone has to watch the edge of the camp. And someone, maybe an older person whose legs are no longer strong enough for long hunts, sits beside the fire and makes sure it does not die. That person might be holding one of the most important jobs in the entire group. Because in winter, warmth is not only comfort. Warmth is time. Warmth is sleep. Warmth is the difference between waking up tomorrow and becoming one more thing the cold takes. But fire alone was not enough. If you sit beside a fire in freezing wind, you quickly discover that heat runs away. The side facing the flames burns. The side facing the night freezes. Ancient humans needed walls. Sometimes those walls were caves or rock shelters. A cave was not automatically safe. It could be damp, smoky, already occupied, or positioned badly against the wind. But a good cave did something precious. It reduced exposure. It blocked wind. It held some warmth. It gave people a place where the fire could matter. In other places, humans built shelters from whatever the landscape offered. Wood, hides, branches, stone, snow, earth, and in some remarkable Ice Age sites, even mammoth bones. Archaeologists have found Upper Paleolithic structures in Central and Eastern Europe made with large mammoth bones, sometimes arranged in circular forms. We should be careful here. Not every mammoth bone structure was necessarily a normal family house. Some may have had symbolic uses, storage uses, ritual uses, or mixed purposes. Prehistory rarely hands us a label that says, "Hello, this was the living room." But the important point is this. Ancient humans were not just wandering helplessly through frozen landscapes. They were building. They were choosing locations. They were arranging materials. They were turning hostile spaces into survivable spaces. And that is a huge mental leap. A shelter is not just a pile of things. A shelter means you can imagine a future condition. You can think, tonight the wind will come from there, so the opening should face here. The fire should sit there. The sleeping bodies should be close enough for warmth, but not so close that smoke becomes unbearable. The hides need to block drafts. The roof needs to survive snow. That is not primitive. That is engineering with no instruction manual. Then came clothing, which may be one of the most underrated survival technologies in human history. Modern people think of clothing as identity first. Style, status, culture. A way to say, this is who I am, or at least this is who I want strangers to think I am for the next several hours. But before clothing became fashion, it was portable shelter. Animal hides, furs, and later sewn garments allowed humans to carry warmth with them. This changed everything. A fire can warm a camp, but clothing can warm a moving body. Shelter can protect you in one place, but clothing lets you search, hunt, gather, scout, migrate, and return. And making useful winter clothing is much harder than just throwing a skin over your shoulders and hoping for the best. Loose skins help, but wind finds openings. Cold enters gaps. Wet material becomes dangerous. If you want real protection, clothing has to fit. It has to cover wrists, ankles, neck, and torso. It has to allow movement without falling apart. It has to be scraped, softened, pierced, tied, repaired, and sometimes layered. This is where bone awls, hide working tools, and laterite needles become so important. The appearance of fine sewing tools in the Paleolithic suggests not only that people were covering themselves, but that they were refining the way they covered themselves. Better seams, better fit, better layers, better survival. Think about that for a second. Somewhere, a person sat by firelight holding bone, hide, sinew, and a sharp tool, trying to solve the problem of wind. That person was not just making clothes. They were making a second skin that evolution had refused to provide. And every stitch was a small argument against freezing to death. But even if you had fire, shelter, and clothing, winter still had another weapon: hunger. In warm months, the landscape offers choices. Fruits, nuts, roots, eggs, insects, fish, small animals, large animals, plants that can be tested, remembered, and gathered again. In winter, many of those options vanish or become hidden. Plants die back. Rivers freeze. Animals migrate, hibernate, or become harder to find. Snow can cover tracks or reveal them, depending on conditions. A familiar valley can become strange overnight, and your body, cruelly, needs more energy when it is cold. You are burning calories simply to stay warm. Walking through snow costs more effort. Carrying wood costs more effort. Hunting with numb hands costs more effort. Even thinking clearly becomes harder when your body is cold and underfed. This is where ancient survival becomes less about strength and more about knowledge. You need to know which animals stay nearby in winter. You need to know where they shelter. You need to know how wind moves across ridges. You need to know which frozen surface is safe and which one will break. You need to know where roots might still be dug from the ground, where nuts may have been cached, where fish gather, where birds remain, where herds pass when the open plain becomes too harsh. The landscape becomes a memory test. And this is one of the great hidden truths about hunter-gatherer life. Survival was not random wandering. It was information. Deep, detailed, local information carried inside minds and shared through stories, teaching, observation, and experience. A child who learned where winter fuel could be found had a better chance. A teenager who learned to read animal tracks in snow had a better chance. An adult who remembered that a certain valley stayed less windy because of its shape had a better chance. An elder who had lived through many winters was not just old. They were an archive. In a world without writing, older people were libraries with scars. This matters because winter changes the value of knowledge. In summer, a reckless young hunter might look impressive. In winter, the person who remembers the quiet place where animals cross the frozen stream may save everyone. That is a different kind of power. Food preservation may also have mattered, depending on the place, the group, and the resources available. We should not imagine every Paleolithic group storing mountains of food like later farming societies. That would be too simple. Many mobile hunter-gatherers lived with immediate return patterns, consuming food relatively soon after finding it. Long-term storage leaves uneven evidence, and archaeologists have to be careful about proving it. But preserving meat by drying, smoking, freezing, or sealing it in fat is possible and documented in hunter-gatherer contexts. In cold environments, nature itself can become part of the storage system. Meat can freeze. Fish can dry. Smoke can slow decay. Fat becomes precious because it carries dense energy. And fat is everything in winter. Imagine a child crying from cold at night. Imagine an injured hunter who cannot walk far. Imagine an older woman who knows the migration routes, but cannot carry heavy loads anymore. Imagine a mother trying to keep an infant warm against her skin while smoke fills the shelter and the wind pushes against the walls. Every one of these people is a cost to the group in one way, but every one of them can also be part of why the group survives. Children are the future. Injured hunters may recover. Elders carry memory. Mothers keep infants alive. Skilled makers produce clothing, tools, cordage, containers, coverings. The person who cannot run fastest may still know how to prepare hides better than anyone else. The person who cannot hunt may keep the fire alive all night. Winter makes human value more complex than muscle, and there is evidence across prehistoric human life that care mattered. Injuries healed. People survived conditions that would have required help. Groups did not always abandon the weak immediately. Again, we should not turn ancient life into a cartoon of kindness. It was harsh. People died. Resources were limited. But the idea that early humans were simply brutal individuals dragging clubs through the snow is not just wrong. It is lazy. Humans survived because they were social in unusually intense ways. They watched each other, taught each other, warned each other, copied each other, remembered who knew what, and winter rewarded that. But perhaps the most powerful winter tool was not fire, clothing, shelter, or food. It was planning. A lean animal gives protein, but protein alone can become a problem if there is not enough fat or carbohydrate with it. Humans need energy-rich food, and in cold conditions, fatty animals become incredibly valuable. Bone marrow, brain tissue store animal fat, and fatty cuts are not gross extras. They are survival fuel. This is one reason big animals mattered so much. A large kill could feed many people, but it also created a new problem. Meat spoils. Predators smell it. Other humans may want it. You have to process it quickly. Cut it. Share it. Dry it. Smoke it. Move it. Guard it. A successful hunt was not the end of the work. It was the beginning of a race against time, bacteria, weather, and every hungry mouth in the landscape. And this is where cooperation becomes unavoidable. There is a fantasy version of prehistory where one heroic caveman defeats winter through raw toughness. This is nonsense. One person alone in deep winter is in serious trouble. A group can divide labor. A group can keep watch. A group can share heat. A group can care for the sick. A group can send some people to gather fuel while others repair tools, prepare hides, process food, or protect children. Winter made selfishness expensive. Not impossible, of course. Humans have always been complicated. But in a harsh cold season, the group that shared information, shared food, and protected its weakest members often had an advantage over the group that broke apart under pressure. And this may be one of the most important parts of the story. Winter did not only test human bodies, it tested human relationships. Because winter is different from many dangers. A predator attack is immediate. A storm may arrive quickly. A fall breaks your leg in one moment. But winter is slow. It announces itself through signs. Days shorten. Animals change behavior. Leaves fall. Air sharpens. Frost appears in the morning. Birds leave. The world starts quietly removing options. To survive winter, humans had to notice those signs before the crisis arrived. That may sound simple now, because you have calendars, weather apps, and relatives who complain about the cold 3 months before it happens. But for ancient humans, recognizing seasonal patterns was a major cognitive achievement. It meant remembering last year. It meant comparing that memory with this year. It meant understanding that the future could resemble the past. That is enormous. The group that waited until starvation began was already late. The group that prepared hides before the cold became deadly had a chance. The group that moved toward a better winter camp before snow blocked the route had a chance. The group that gathered fuel before storms had a chance. The group that watched animal movements and understood what they meant had a chance. Winter forced humans to think beyond the present. And that might be the deeper answer to the question. Ancient humans survived their first winters not because they were magically tougher than modern people. They survived because winter trained them to become future-oriented animals. It rewarded memory. It rewarded teaching. It rewarded patience. It rewarded cooperation. It punished laziness, denial, bad planning, and the person who said, "I'm sure the firewood situation will work itself out," which, historically speaking, is not the energy you want in a glacial environment. There's also a psychological side to this that is easy to miss. Winter is dark. Darkness changes people. Long nights mean more time inside shelters, more time near fire, more time listening, repairing, remembering, and telling. Around a winter fire, stories become more than entertainment. They become storage devices. A story can tell children which berries not to eat. A story can explain where the herd went last year. A story can warn about thin ice. A story can preserve a memory of someone who froze because they slept too far from the group. A story can turn survival information into something emotionally memorable. This is how knowledge survives when nobody can write it down. Maybe that is why fire feels so deeply human to us. Not just because it warms the body, but because it gathers minds. In the long, cold dark, the fire becomes the place where the group becomes a group again. People repair tools there. Prepare food there. Warm hands there. Teach children there. Watch sparks rise in a black air and try to make sense of a world that keeps trying to kill them. Winter may have shaped not just what humans did, but what humans became. More careful, more social, more inventive, more dependent on memory, more attached to stories, more aware that tomorrow is a thing you can prepare for. And here is the strange part. You still carry some of this inside you. You may not need to track reindeer across frozen ground or scrape hides by firelight, but your brain still understands winter as a signal. The shortening day, the desire for warmth, the pull toward rich food, the comfort of gathering with others, the strange emotional power of a small light in a dark room. These are not random preferences. They are echoes. Somewhere far behind you, there were people who watched the first frost appear and understood what it meant. People who had no guarantee of spring. People who learned that survival was not one heroic act, but thousands of small correct decisions made before it was too late. Put the firewood somewhere dry. Keep the child close. Repair the torn hide. Follow the tracks before snow covers them. Listen to the elder. Share the fat. Block the wind. Do not let the fire die. That was winter survival. Not one invention. Not one genius moment. Not one lucky cave. A whole chain of human behaviors, each one fragile by itself, but powerful together. So how did ancient humans survive their first winter? They survived by learning that the world changes. They survived by remembering that change. They survived by building warmth where none existed. They survived by turning animal skins into portable shelter, caves into homes, fire into a social center, food into strategy, and fear into preparation. They survived because they stopped being creatures of only the present. And somewhere on one of those long nights, when the wind was pushing against the shelter and the snow had covered the valley and the fire was low but still alive, one of your ancestors opened their eyes in the dark, felt the warmth of other bodies nearby, heard someone breathing beside them, and realized something that may have changed human history. Winter could be survived, not conquered, not defeated, never that, but survived. And sometimes for a small group of freezing humans at the edge of the Ice Age, that was enough to keep the future alive.